Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Tom McKevitt. Tom McKevitt represents the 17th Assembly District in New York State, and that includes a portion of Nassau County. We want to thank you folks in Nassau County for joining us. And Tom McKevitt, yes. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Mike.
We were talking about this before the show started. The portion in Nassau County that you have represented, how many years now? How many years have you been in the Assembly?
Well, that's two different questions.
I did. And I realized that. That's why I changed it.
Because I have two different districts, actually. Remember, in my original district, the old 17th district, it was Floral Park, New Hyde Park, Garden City Park, East Wilson, Wilson Park, Albertson, Mineola, Carl Place, Westbury, Garden City, East Meadow, North Belmont, North American, Merrick.
And I did not tell him there was going to be a quiz either. I didn't do it.
Many times people say I should have been auditioning to be a Long Island Railroad conductor during time they said that. So the great thing about being in Albany is just when I had all those communities down pat, in 2012 they redistricted me by 87%.
Wow.
Claudia Tenney was redistricted by 91%. And I was redistricted by 87%. I was the second biggest redistricting in the state of New York.
So now these are the towns that you represent now.
Now.
Include East Meadow, Levittown, Farmingdale, Massapequa.
Correct.
All right. So that's who you've represented since that redistricting.
Since 2012. Yes.
All right. And that's going to come to a close.
Yes, it will.
Because Tom McKevitt is no longer going to be a member of the New York State Assembly after the end of this year.
That's correct.
You have been elected to a new position. You are going to be a Nassau County legislator.
That's right.
Well, we might as well talk about where you're going to be representing as a Nassau County legislator. Where's that? What's your district look like?
It will be East Meadow, North Belmont, North Merrick, and a little bit of North Wantua. So essentially a lot of what used to be in my old district prior to 2012. All right. That's where most of that is.
And you're an East Meadow guy,
yes,
right?
Lifetime.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Only place I've ever been. Yeah, haven't gone very far, except Albany.
You spent some time in Albany.
That's right.
A lot of time in Albany, right?
But haven't been anywhere else.
So we've got some change going on in Tom McKevitt's personal life, but things here at the state capitol, the more they change, the more they stay the same, right?
Right.
I mean, we're hearing some kind of dismal fiscal news as we head into the end of the 2017 year.
Yes.
The governor is saying in 2018 things don't look so good. He's spending a lot of time thinking about what the federal government is doing, for right or wrong, in terms of their budgeting, and that it's going to be changing, impacting New York State's budget. Is truth to that?
Isn't it interesting? He spent a lot of time in the federal government. I'll just leave it at that.
All right.
Where he spends a lot of his focus and attention. Maybe beyond 2018 is where his attention may be. But in many regards, New York State, a very large, very complex state. And one thing I've learned in this job is that, you have the suburban area, you got New York City, which thinks they control the entire agenda, but you have very much of an upstate rural agricultural region as well, too, which I think sometimes gets forgotten by especially the majority sometimes in this House. And what I think has got to be concerned is that we need a person who's going to be focusing full time on these challenges in New York State. And you can go and you can point fingers at the federal government all day long, and you can do that. But at the end of the day, we're elected to govern this state and govern this region. And no matter what hand you have been dealt, you have to operate within those parameters and govern to the best of your ability. And that's what I've done at A level and hopefully continue to do level, and that's hopefully what a governor will be doing from here on in.
And it's true to say that in terms of the state of New York, the split is pretty even between the metropolitan area in terms of population and that upstate larger region that's not the metropolitan area. It's a pretty 50-50 split, right?
Right, yes.
So you can't just focus on one because the other won't be happy about that. That's one of the things that makes, and we've discussed this many times on our programs, it's one of the things that makes legislating and governing in New York State a difficult thing, because the interests of downstate versus the interests of Long Island and upstate New York oftentimes compete with each other.
You certainly do. And again, particularly what you have is you have certain, again, majority, not to say it again, will take it from their perspective and forget that the rest of the state exists. And those views certainly have to be shared. There is a lot of views and a lot of diversity, and you can't just say, well, this is how we feel about this, and everyone else is just going to have to live with it. And that's a dynamic that I've seen to a great extent.
Although I think I've heard the governor almost use those very words sometimes, that this is the way it's going to be and everybody else is just going to have to deal with it, right?
Right.
So how about, is he right, though, to be paying attention to what the feds are thinking about? I mean, they're talking about tax reform. There's been a lot of concern about the impact of that tax reform on New York State, the state and local tax deductions, things along those lines, and what it means in terms of federal monies coming into the state of New York.
It certainly is. And as far as if they go and they get rid of the deductibility for the state and local taxes, that's going to have a huge negative impact not only for the taxpayer, but let's look at the real estate market in Long Island alone. We've had a situation where we've had a nice recovery, and we had a very tough time in the mid to late 2000s. And right now you have one of the strongest sellers markets that I've seen in quite some time. But if you go and you say that you can no longer go and deduct your property taxes, or it's really limited, that's going to automatically have a very drastic decrease on real estate prices and can do another of rippling effects on the rest of the economy. But instead of going and saying to our representative in Congress, well, if you don't stop it, you must resign immediately to go show a protest. Well, why don't you go and have conversations with them and working from the best coalition you have to change that policy or make it better, rather than just saying person, well, you weren't successful, you must therefore leave, and I'll go and select who your new successor will be, despite them not being able to go and have much great legislative successes. So,
even if your professional life wasn't about to change and you were going to be shifting from one seat to another, as you are sitting here now in the month of December, heading into the closeout of 2017, if you were looking at the situation in front of you, what would you be thinking? Is it that New York State's in some trouble heading into the new year, or everything's all right? Well,
I don't think everything is ever all right, because, again, there are a lot of challenges which we have failed to address in the state for quite some time. We've been speaking since the day the governor took office and before then about mandate relief on local governments. That has never happened. He promised it never occurred. So there hasn't been done many things on trying to make all our governments be able to go and operate more efficiently and providing that really good benefit back to the taxpayer. As we go into this year, the governor will tell you we have a $4.5 billion deficit going into the future, the upcoming year. That's, surprise, surprise, it's a little different than when he tells it. It's really closer to $1.7 billion. Because he likes to manipulate the numbers to advantage at certain times. And even if you go, say, 1.7 or 4.5, wherever it is, when he took office in 2011, we were at $13 billion. And had to make some very, very severe choices back then, whether it was cutting back school aid or cutting back on Medicaid funding, things like that. Certainly, will this be a tighter year? Yes. Is it going to be drastic cuts? No, it's not. Again, we're talking $1.7 billion out of a $160 billion plus budget that we're looking at this point. So from a percentage of the budget, it's actually a rather tinier percentage than we've had to deal with in the past. That being said, you can't tell the school districts you're going to be looking at double-digit increases in school funding this year. I've already told the education groups in my district you're not getting it. Well, you may have a small increase. There may be some. But if you're looking at numbers that we saw in the last couple of years, like eliminating the gap elimination adjustment one year and getting significant increases, that's not going to happen. So it's going to be a time where everyone has to tighten their belts, but it's not going to be tightening it so much that you're cutting off the circulation.
It's going to be an interesting transition for you, and I take note the fact that you talked about mandate relief,
yes,
and how the state hasn't really done anything, even though the governor did make that one of his big campaigning charges in recent years. Because as you shift towards a new position as a county legislator, that's going to mean just that much more to you. I guess you'll bring an interesting perspective to the role as county legislator, knowing how things really go on at the state capitol.
Well, I kind of tell my colleagues there when I get there in a couple of weeks that certainly is something we've been fighting for very much for mandate relief, and it didn't happen. So now I'm here on this level trying to fight for even more. But if we think at the end of the rainbow this is going to happen anywhere in the near future, it's not, because we were promised that 6-7 years ago. And it still hasn't become a reality. So now the counties, even more so, are in our own situation. And it's amazing how the governor has all these plans about consolidation of services for the counties to do, which we've been doing for the most part. There's not a whole lot more fat to cut in this state, whether you're a Nassau or whether you're a Dutchess or whether you're an Erie in that regard. And the problem is there are many policies the state has done to not make it easier. Yes, the state has stopped the growth in Medicaid, but they haven't really taken the Medicaid burden off the localities. Or even better than that, as we go back to earlier in this year, dealing with the legal aid or the indigent legal services for criminal defendants, which there was a bill which would take that burden off the counties and take it to the state. The governor just flat out vetoed it. That would have been the perfect example of taking this burden off the localities, and this governor just didn't want to do it. So there hasn't been a really plan to make it efficient in all levels of government in trying to make it easy for all levels of government to operate efficiently without these state mandates.
We spent a lot of time in our last couple of years talking about corruption at the state capitol, too.
Yes.
We saw in recent years the conviction of the Assembly Speaker, the conviction of the Senate Majority Leader. There's a new trial about to get underway involving some of the governor's top aides. And we've seen in recent months the overturning and the potential retrial of the Speaker and the Senate. I mean, has the legislature, has the state of New York really done anything, though, in terms of trying to keep that kind of corruption, the culture of Albany, from allowing that sort of corruption to happen?
The governor has said over and over again that the most groundbreaking ethics legislation has been passed. And I think he said that about 3 or 4 times in the last several years. And these things still occur. And I think one thing you have to look at very seriously is you're always going to have bad people in every profession, whether it's in politics, whether it's in education, whether it's police force. And what I think is very important that we have a very, very vigilant way of looking to go and make sure we catch those who are there. Has there been the true institutional reform, which is really needed? Term limits, I think, which would be very important to make this happen. If you really want to go on about restricting the outside income, you could have that conversation about that. But all they've done is hit a certain amount of points around the edges without really going to the strong point of it. Mike, I think the biggest thing I've noticed in the last several years, and I think was the biggest problematic point from New York State government is how powerful the governor has become in the state, particularly in the budget process. Because the budget's supposed to be about money, school funding formulas, and this past year, what was the biggest issue in the budget was raise the age on juvenile defendants. What did that have to do with the budget? It didn't. And what this governor is doing, taking all these other social issues and cramming into the budget, creates so much leverage with it, and that's not the way this budget process was designed. And that, to me, is the biggest shortcoming. You know, listen, the Constitutional Convention went down in flames, as we saw this past year, overwhelming at that point is. But I think the biggest thing which needs to be done is changing that part of the Constitution so it's not essentially the governor dictating how this whole process is supposed to work.
I thought it was interesting that the people voted down the Constitutional Convention so overwhelmingly, yet we're sure to make sure that the bond proposition about pension forfeiture went through big time. Big time.
As it should.
Just a couple minutes to go here. Let's talk a little bit about the relationship between Nassau County and the state of New York. All these years now, you've looked at it as a state legislator.
Right.
Now you're going to shift roles and we'll be looking at it from the county legislator point of view. Tell us about that relationship. What does Nassau County bring to the state of New York?
Nassau County, first of all, has great recreational facilities, has Jones Beach, has the birth of suburbia. You know, the whole suburban part of life started in Levittown, which is represented at this point is. The biggest problem that we have on the state level is that when Nassau had some severe financial issues going back about 18 years ago, the state created this was called the State Control Board, the NIFA, the Nassau Interim Finance Authority. And essentially that state control board now essentially rules Nassau County's finances. And the problem is that NIFA goes and manipulates the finances to such an extent, they're always going to be in control. So I'm in a county where we can't get a budget passed anymore without a state agency's say-so at this point. And that's going to be a tough relationship I still have to continue to work with.
Is there a movement to try to get Nassau County to be independent from the state in those terms now, or is it still important that that tie remain?
I mean, one of the candidates for county executive had a plan to make that happen. My fear is no matter how far ahead we are of the game, that NIFA will just change the numbers to such an extent where they'll always be in charge. So unless the state legislature changes the statute, which I may be asking my colleagues to do, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get out from underneath that in the near future.
All right. Well, in our last show, let's let the people know how they can contact Tom McKevitt. And these numbers will still be valid heading into the new year if you folks want to know how to reach out and get some help from your state representatives. You can contact Tom McKevitt at the East Meadow office. Dial 228-4960. That's in the 516 area code, 228-4960. Tom McKevitt, thanks for joining us today. All the best to you. Congratulations and good luck in the new year.
Thank you so much, Mike.
All right. Thanks to you folks, too. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. We'll hope that you have a happy and healthy holiday, and we'll see you in 2018 as well.